everyone. Good morning. So thank you all for coming to the last day of the event. I'm very happy to speak here, and I'm especially happy to speak after Christopher. I'm glad I didn't have slides on the origins of the Expo, because he already covered it for me. It makes my work easy. So today I'm going to be talking about basically how SDG themes are being woven into the Expo through mostly media discourse. So I'm an anthropologist. I want to do field work, but there is no Expo to do field work with yet. So I'm trying to certainly look at how people talk about the Expo and eventually combine that with fieldwork. So first of all, there's always narratives in expos. And since the beginning, as we saw, there's been very different narratives being used. They've changed over times. In the 1800s, there was mostly narratives of industrial development and national achievements and competition in many ways, showcasing cultural and industrial innovations in a nationalist game of one-upmanship, which accelerated over time. In the 20th century into the 21st century, we see a shift from these very nationalist competitive narratives to more about industrialization and modernization, and then cooperation. They've become complexly layered narratives. And national narratives have been overlaid with globally trending themes of the evolution of human society, of world peace, environmentalism, inclusivity. In the 21st century, however, I'm trying to figure out what kinds of narratives are being discussed, who's discussing them, who's leading these discussions. So I'll open with this quote here, which is actually from the Deputy Secretary General of the Japan Association for the 2025 World Exposition. This was at the Global Talk event, Let's Think About SDGs, which is part of a dialogue series empowering youth, addressing climate change and the SDGs. This is held in April. Actually, Christopher was there. He presented at this talk as well. It's available on YouTube. And so the Secretary General here said, I hope that today's event will provide an opportunity to everyone to think about the SDGs in unison, for each of us to start considering them as our own personal responsibility, and to think about how we can work together to solve these issues. And interestingly, he drew a connection with the Olympics here, which is part of the broader project that Barbara and I are working on with the Olympics and the Expo. He said, if the Olympic Games is a festival of sports and athletes, the Expo is a festival of human knowledge, open to all people. I hope that you will visit the Expo and experience the world, the future with all of your senses. So here we see the narrative of the Expo is being framed as this place for human knowledge to come together and for people to experience it, experience the world in this space. So in my talk today, I'll be looking at these themes of the Expo. There are many different themes. The origins of the SDGs and how they're connected with Expos. And then specifically, I'll look at the Expo Sustainability Action Plan of the Expo 2025. And then a brief connection to the Expo's SDGs in business in this context, and then a brief conclusion. So the Expo themes, I would say there's something for everyone in the Expo themes. There are at least 52 official and semi-official themes, sub-themes, concepts, and goals in the Expo materials. There's also a category of corporate engagement, which they call co-creation challenges. And these have companies that join in different capacities, and they're specifically designed to encourage small and medium enterprises and companies outside of the Kansai area to participate. So even though it's an Osaka Expo, they're trying to get companies from across Japan to get involved in some way or another. So in other words, there's someone for everyone, and any company can link up with the theme without having to stretch their corporate identity, which is different from the Olympics, which tried to get sponsors, but oftentimes you had to do something related to the Olympics in order to be a sponsor, or at least that's how companies had to justify it. But with the Expo, anyone can be involved. Now, one of the things we see in a lot of these themes is Expos in particular, which have global corporations involved with them, they tend to be trying to link in with many of the different kinds of acronyms that are currently floating around the world. So this is why we see different companies advertising things like these variety of acronyms: CSR, CSV, DEI, ESG, SDGs. Like this alphabet soup is being used in different ways to try to make a company seem more legitimate in advocating that they're part of environmental or social change, and the Expo is one place for them to openly display these kinds of themes in different ways that they advertise. there's at least 21 official themes and various concepts and goals which are interspersed throughout the material, which is primarily what I'm investigating, the promotional materials and corporate advertisements. There's one official Expo theme, which is designing future society for our lives, which sounds rather clumsy in English. And then there are all of these other sub-themes, concepts, project sub-themes, week themes, domestic pavilion-related themes, sub-theme Expo categories, goals, and additional goals. So it's quite a lot to comb through. Now, as an anthropologist, I don't know how to do quantitative analysis, but I did try to use MaxQDA, my very first attempt to figure out what kinds of themes, concepts, and goals are being used in terms of specific terms. So I tried to look for specific terms and see just what showed up the most in these different 52 themes and sub-themes, etc. So the environment or SDG-related terms showed up in 13 out of 52. Economy or society, which often came together in about 13, and then health was in about 4. Not surprisingly, life, lives, and future came up the most because those are the main themes for the Expo. But here we can see many of the concepts and themes are trying to connect with SDGs, but not all, right? So only about a third of them actually do. So now to take a step back and look at where did this idea of linking Expos and SDGs come from? So in fact, SDGs are an outgrowth of something originally called Millennium Development Goals, which are MDGs, and these were announced in 2000. In fact, there were 8 of these, as you can see on the screen, and these are actually an outgrowth of the International Development Strategy of 1970 from the UN. So the UN has been working on trying to make goals, and set timelines for, well, at least 50 years now. In 2015 was the adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, because the MDGs were supposed to end at 2015, so then they needed a new set of goals, and now they expanded it to 17. So there are 17 goals with 10 targets per goal, or at least 10, for a total of 169 targets within the total SDG concept. And then there are sub-targets within each target. So again, tremendous layers of ideas embedded within the SDGs. The SDGs are here on the right. Now, there is a Sustainable Development Report in 2022, which was trying to look at how is Japan doing with SDGs. And it ranked 19 out of 163 countries. South Sudan was at the bottom. Of course, we see Europe in the top 10 here. What was wrong with Japan? Well, they scored very low for gender equality, for responsible consumption and production, for climate action, and for partnership for the good, for the goals. And then they actually scored high in only number 9, which is industry, innovation, infrastructure. So Japan has a lot of room for improvement according to these development reports. The US was 41, China 56. So at least doing better than the US, we can say. Now, if you go back and look at how have the Expo been related to SDG kinds of themes? Well, so of course, the SDGs only emerged in 2015, but if we go back to the 1970s when the International Development Goals were originally developed by the UN, we can see some early connections between Expos and environmental ideas. So the Spokane, Washington Expo in 1974, pre-SDGs of course, but their concept was celebrating tomorrow's fresh new environment. So we already see environmental consciousness as being part of an Expo from 1974. Then we had the Hanover Specialized Expo was Man, Nature, Technology. The Aichi Expo was Nature's Wisdom. The 2008 Zaragoza Specialized Expo was Water and Sustainable Development. The 2010 Shanghai Expo was Better City, Better Life, which was about also environment. 2015 Milano was Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life, and specifically they start to address from 2015 SDGs as they were announced in that year. And this was supposed to address number 1, number 2, number 12. The Astana Specialized Expo was Future Energy, which is the energy SDG. And then Dubai was Connecting Minds, Creating the Future. They had 14 out of 17 SDGs specifically expressed in their materials, excluding number 1, which is no poverty, and number 2, which was zero hunger. These were not on their agenda. Number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, appeared in the original Expo in materials. It disappeared for about 3 years in their materials, and then it reappeared later. So I'm not sure why that happened, but it dropped out of their Expo plans for a while. Okay, so Expo 2025, the Osaka Kansai Expo, so they have an Expo Sustainability Action Plan. And this is specifically talking about how the year 2025 is 5 years before the target of 2030 for achieving the SDGs. So this is one of the reasons why they try to say this is a very important time. We only have 5 years left. They say it will serve as a great opportunity to see the progress toward the SDGs and accelerate actions towards their achievement. And this same action plan says, at the same time, by considering the future society from a medium to long-term perspective, it is expected the SDGs will not only be achieved by 2030, but will also present a vision beyond the SDGs, which is why they have SDGs and beyond written in many of their materials. So they make a lot of claims in their materials in terms of what they will do for SDGs. Now, on page 3 of this document, they describe that they will establish a carbon-free society, realize a recycling-oriented society, pursue harmony with nature, and achieve a comfortable environment, thereby ensuring sustainability in the operation of the Expo. So these are their open claims that they make at the beginning of this document. How do they actually expect and plan to achieve these? They have 5 goals within their sustainability plan, separated into five spheres: people, planet, prosperity, peace, partnership. And they have concrete pledges. So their people pledge is basically about multi-language signage. So interestingly here, they say they will leverage technologies to accomplish Society 5.0 by using multilingual translation services. So their people goal is basically about making signs readable to people from different countries. It seems to set the bar a little bit low, but that's what they're doing for people. For planet, I think this is related to what's happening with the German pavilion. So they have zone air conditioning systems, which are not for each pavilion, but rather they have cooling water plants which produce cooling water for air conditioning, and they supply these to different structures within the Expo. Aquifer thermal energy storage, 100 electric vehicles to ensure access around it. In the original Expo bid, the committee said all Expos would be carbon neutral. So when they applied for the Expo at the BIE, this is what they pledged, but the action plan now says there are recommendations about conserving energy. So again, they've lowered the bar a little bit here. The big topic we see in the news a lot is this grand roof ring, which is the largest wooden structure created in the world, apparently. And their goal is to disassemble it to process it into new items, so it's supposed to be sustainable. Although when I talk with people from the construction industry, they said, how much time and energy will that take to do? And no one really wants to buy these things afterwards, so that has to be worked on. Other interesting things they mentioned for Planet is they will mow the grass around the Expo site. To encourage birds and harvest mice to live there. And they will check the flying of birds in and around the Expo. So some pretty important planet activities there, checking those birds. In terms of prosperity, they will comply with the Sustainable Procurement Code. I hope we can talk about this later. I've heard that this is actually quite complex. And also revitalization of local industries is one of the things they're aiming for. So this is why they're trying to get a lot of small, medium enterprises involved, specifically through their co-design challenges for co-creation as part of one of their concepts within the 52 themes, which is the People's Living Lab, to try to get people involved directly in sustainable productions. In terms of peace, they want to provide opportunities to experience the Expo for people who have difficulty accessing it, such as overseas residents, senior citizens, and expectant mothers. So this is why they're trying to use virtual technology to make a virtual Expo simultaneous with the physical Expo. And this is part of the peace goal, which is basically mostly like inclusivity, ultimately. Then these other aspects are part of their peace goal, which is the Women's Pavilion, which is actually hosted by Cartier, the diamond company. The second year doing it, I think they also did in Dubai. And then their procurement code, and they're also offering flex time to workers at the Expo. This is part of their peace, as well as mental health training. Lastly, they have partnership, and this is, the goal is to promote Japan, particularly Osaka and the Kansai region, to the world. Their co-creation challenges, and then also as the Expos are very much seen as a place for education, and often education activities are embedded in Expo activities, and so they're actually have these guided student tours for classes for students. So a total of 10 hours of integrated study in class curriculum will be used with Expo visits, and also posting videos online is one of their goals. Okay, so to go to the businesses and SDGs, so from what I can see from companies involved in the SDG-related Expo activities, large companies that have resources to devote to pursuing SDG goals will probably use the Expo as a way to further boost their corporate image. And some of these will pursue these goals with sincere intentions, and especially those who actually are big enough to have DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, offices and officers will have the resources to be able to mobilize this kind of activity and language. Now, small, medium enterprises, of course, are in a much more difficult situation. They have fewer staff who they can devote to achieving SDGs. But one benefit of the way the Expo has been designed is with these co-creation challenges, which put companies together with Expo themes, they can actually, even small companies can link what they're doing with Expo themes. So even a small company that does a little bit of recycling as part of their project can now connect with the SDGs and the Expo as a way to advertise what they do. Now, one of the interesting connections was Hakuhodo, which is the second largest advertising company in Japan. They've been involved quite early in this Team Expo 2025 program co-creation partner role since August 2021. Now, they came up with this notion of the Earth Mall project, which was action platforms for realizing SDGs that seeks to connect companies, NPOs, academics, and government actors. And this emerged from the Open 2030 project by Yale University professor of media studies, Gagné Norichika. And they created an Earth Mall website as well as an Earth Mall webpage on Rakuten, all connected with the Expo and SDGs. And they have products that fall within 12 certification categories, including another alphabet soup of BAP, MSC, ASC, FSC, PE, FC, RSPO, Rainforest Alliance, International Fair Trade, GOTS, USDA Organic, E Organic, and JS Organic. I don't even know what most of these mean, but these are all apparently certifications you can use to make your product stand out in the SDG market. They even created what I would say is a failed buzzword. They tried to create the word sasukatsu, which is sustainable katsudo, which they defined as small, unremarkable actions that people can perform in their own way in their daily life that lead to sustainability. Now, this was actually created by this professor, and it was advertised by Hakuhodo. Now, you can find it on the Earth Mall Rakuten webpage, but interestingly, the Earth Mall website itself has no new update since May 2022. And the Earth Mall Rakuten webpage announcements began to slow in late 2023, and the last post they've had was January 2024. So, and if you Google Sasukatsu, you can only find it in relation to this website. So it did not take off. I have my own theories about why this katsu failed to take off, and that'd be interesting to talk about later. Okay, so SDGs and the Expo, well, there are some negative or somewhat critical perspectives on this. The geographer Patrice Ballister asserts that the SDGs are increasingly superimposed on the discourse of the BIE. This is the Bureau International Exhibition, which is in charge of International World Expos, becoming a kind of breviary for all the countries and pavilions of the era of the Anthropocene, and suggests that since at least the 1980s, the BIE relies on sustainable development to justify and lead to a revival of exhibitions in the 1980s and 1990s. And further, the SDGs become a means of legitimizing the Expo and making it acceptable to local populations as well as international visitors and tourists. So here they see kind of like SDG washing for Expos, right? This is how they try to push through to make it acceptable to local populations and global corporations. However, the Expo watcher and journalist Inaba Shigekatsu, who's written a couple of books on SDGs and Expos, he says, he has much more positive take. He says, contemporary expos are not just about showcasing skills and products, but they're also about communicating messages to the world about arts and global scale issues. So he says, in this way, World Expos, like the 2025 Osaka Kansai Expo, play the important role of orienting us in the same direction toward achieving SDGs. So again, just like Christopher mentioned, it's about bringing people together and putting them in the, giving them a space to think about things together, right? So are we living in a world of postmodern World Expos? And so to borrow from postmodern theory, which I'm not a postmodernist, but this idea of a breakdown of meta-narratives, right, with the globalization, et cetera, we could say that World Expos typify this fragmentation of meta-narratives into multiple sub-narratives that span a diverse range of issues facing our planet and each society. So instead of finding coherence and purpose to these overarching World Expo themes, the World Expo may provide us with a venue to see the panoply of challenges facing human society and the Earth everywhere all at once and all in one place at the Expo. So this is one place for us to be able to visualize how we're all connected in facing these issues. I'll end with this note from a view from space, maybe putting the world back into World Expos. So this is from the astronaut Ron Guerin. which I think he makes an interesting note. So he said, when I looked out the window of the International Space Station, I saw the unbelievable thinness of our planet's atmosphere. In that moment, I was hit with the sobering realization that the paper-thin layer that keeps everything living on our planet alive. I saw an iridescent biosphere teeming with life. I didn't see the economy. But since our human-made systems treat everything, including the very life support systems of our planet, as the wholly owned subsidiary of the global economy, it's obvious from the vantage point of space that we're living a lie. We need to move from thinking economy, society, planet, to planet, society, economy. That's when we're going to continue our evolutionary process. And so perhaps the World Expo will be one place for us to think about that by putting the world back into World Expo. Thank you all for your attention.